because I wanted to start with the first line of the preamble of the Charter and remind us of we the people of the United Nations. Because when I was recently asked to write an article on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the Charter, I thought about this line and the power it has. A power that can and should be revitalized even 80 years later again and again. Imagine the UN Charter to be, at least my imagination is an old nice lady, of course a woman. But search for your own imagination and think about what the Charter has experienced in 80 years. And now she has to deal with AI, with the AI revolution and transformation. And in order to deal with it, we as FNF Human Rights Hub, together with our partner organization, here represented with the Geneva Human Rights Platform, try to bring in experts from both sides today, AI and human rights. And if you're not from one or the other side, you're still welcome. And we're happy to have you here. Because we need you for the next 2 hours in order to discuss AI for human rights, smarter, faster, and fairer monitoring. Actually, the second line of the preamble should be our inspiring motto for today. It is, we the people of the United Nations, we are here to reaffirm faith in human rights, in the dignity and the worth of the human person. Let us use this spirit for today and allow me to welcome here Felix Kirchmeier. He's the Executive Director of the Geneva Human Rights Platform. He's not only going to be the moderator, but also will immediately now introduce the panelists and go with you through our workshop for the next 2 hours. Thanks a lot for being here with us today, and welcome and good discussions.
Thank you very much, Michaela, for this very nice introduction. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this workshop, AI for Human Rights, Smarter, Faster, and Fairer Monitoring. I would like to invite our speakers to the podium. So Dana Ingleton, Peggy Hicks, Yuping Chan, and Abeba Birhane. Unfortunately, we learned this morning that Special Rapporteur Khan cannot join us due to health reasons, so she was not able to join us for this panel. But I'd like to ask the other four ready to take your seats over here. Yes, you don't have to stand all the time. Thank you for being here. So when you came into the room, you were asked human rights or tech experts, bride or groom. We have the stickers, and it's a little bit tough for me to see on that distance, but I see a lot of people with 2 stickers. And it's quite interesting also to see that we really are reuniting here a crowd who self-identify as many of you as both. Some I see have no stickers, so let's see what sticker you pick when you go out actually of that discussion, how you feel that the session here has also contributed to your thinking on those topics. But I'm sure at the tables yourselves, when you actually will be discussing, you see each other's stickers, so you can relate to that very much. So I'd like to thank at the outset the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Human Rights Hub for their support, also the ITU for the excellent collaboration, and Domenico Zipoli and Milica Mirkovic, for the preparation of this event. Thank you, colleagues. As artificial intelligence technologies become increasingly embedded in our societies, their potential to solve global challenges is both exciting and complex. AI tools can support faster data analysis, help uncover patterns in large data sets, and expand the reach of human rights work. But at the same time, their application in sensitive contexts raises important questions about ethics, about accountability, and about the balance between automation and human judgment. Actually, something we heard also in the keynotes this morning. We'll come back to that. In the workshop today now, we want to explore how AI can be leveraged to make human rights monitoring smarter, faster, and fairer, while ensuring that such use is grounded in human rights values and guided by critical human reflection. So I invite all of you to engage actively over the next 2 hours to look at both the opportunities and the boundaries of AI, emphasizing the importance of human-AI collaboration, transparency, and inclusive design. The workshop will combine actually the high-level panel that we'll start with very interactive group exercises. So I promise, even now after lunch, you will be really all activated. There is no, no non-participation. And actually, we'll have first an exercise human-to-human, but also human-to-machine. But let me start with a definitional point also. When we speak about artificial intelligence in this workshop, we refer not only to generative AI models, that was a lot of referred to this morning, like large language models, but also to machine learning systems that analyze patterns in data, automate classification, or support predictive analysis. Both forms of AI are already impacting human rights work in important ways. And it is this practical dimension that we want to explore here. We at the Geneva Human Rights Platform have been working in this also and leading a global initiative on digital human rights tracking tools and databases. I won't present a lot because my role is here the moderation, so I invite you also to check out our website where we have a comprehensive directory of about 60 tracking tools, platforms that are used by government, by national human rights institutions, by civil society around the globe, actually trying to make human rights work more effective and efficient. We have some research papers that you find on the table, most recently AI Decoded, and also another one on the human rights data revolution. And each year we bring together high-level expert roundtables where we search for a new species, the human rights developer. And I hope that we see those with the 2 stickers self-identifying already in that sense. And finally, with the AI Skills Coalition, where we are a partner of, we're also developing training on AI use for human rights professionals with all the necessary safeguards that we'll be looking at. And of course, there I have to add that we're still looking for partners to join us in this exciting project. We'll now start with a panel discussion, and I'll invite each of our speakers to share with us in a 3-4 minute first intervention reflections on 4 questions that I'll pose to all of them, and then we'll open already to the floor. We'll have 2 microphones. You'll give a sign of show of hand when you want to speak, so we make sure, because as ITU informed us, this meeting is being recorded, so if you speak without the microphone, that will be lost for the record. But then we'll move into the segment 2, which is an interactive human-to-human exchange guided by some questions. We'll bring to you a Slido presentation, so have your phones ready to catch the QR code then to participate. And then my colleague Domenico will take over the moderation and lead us into 2 exercises, a hands-on simulation using AI in human rights, followed by follow-up and reporting, and then a demonstration how to build actually with AI smart tools human-AI collaboration for human rights monitoring. And in the end, we'll wrap up with a 20-minute reflection again in plenary, so you can share your thoughts. Now, let me turn to our panel, and I'm introducing, in the order that I'll ask you also then to speak, Dana Ingleton, who is the Executive Director of Euridocs, an NGO that is probably known well to many in the room, actually such a rare species perfectly at the interaction of human rights and technology. We'll then ask Peggy Hicks, Director of the Thematic Engagement, Special Procedures and Right to Development Division of the Office of the High Commissioner, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, to share her reflections, and colleagues of her will also later on show the AI use that the Office of the High Commissioner is actually embarking on. We'll then hear from Yuping Chan, Head of Digital Partnerships and Engagement and the Chief Digital Office of the UNDP, UN Development Programme. And then from Abeba Birhan, who you heard also already this morning, founder of TCD AI Accountability Lab and Research Fellow at the School of Computer Science and Statistics at the Trinity College in Dublin. Now let me come to the questions, and as I informed the speakers already, I'll just put 4 questions over to you. I'll let you pick which ones you want to address in that first round before we then come to the open discussion. So what we'd like to hear, and that might go especially, of course, to the UN organizations, is also how is your organization currently exploring or applying AI in its operations, in programming, or in monitoring efforts? And that can be, of course, both for human rights and for development. And we would like to ask you about the benefits that you see in terms of speed, scalability, or new insights for human rights work. And the other two questions also invite, I guess, for the critical approach to the use of AI. We'd like to know what are the main ethical or operational concerns that you have encountered actually in applying AI tools. It could be bias, it could be explainability, it could be capacity gaps, or actually also public acceptance and trust. And finally, I'd like to ask you to share your thoughts on what responsible rights-based AI integration should look like, actually, and what enabling conditions are needed to make that possible. So with this, I'd like to, well, first, as I said, give the floor to you, Dana, to start us off into this panel. So over to you.
Is this working? Yes, I think, yeah, you can all hear me. I'd actually just like to start by thanking the organizers of the event for pulling this together. I think that this is a very important discussion for this conference, and at the time in history that we are living through, documentation is as important as ever. I'd also like to point out that I love that it's an all-female panel, which is something that often, that often when I come to talk about technology is not the case. So this is very, very cool to be up here and to be with you all. And also, thank you so much for so many of you in the room. It's really heartening to see. So as Felix noted, I'm the executive director of an organization called HRDocs, which stands for Human Rights Information and Documentation Systems. We're over 40 years old, and we've changed a lot over the years, but right now I like to explain us as an odd but wonderful mixture of nerdy librarians, human rights research experts, and technologists. And so what does that really mean? Our mission is to make sure that human rights researchers, activists, advocates, and defenders around the world are collecting and sharing information with change makers to bring about the most effective, positive change for human rights and adjacent communities, environmental communities, humanitarian work, etc. We are basically build our own open source software called Uwazi. It's a documentation database software. And in the last number of years has been leaning heavily into developing our own machine learning tools. I would not say that we compete with the big tech giants, but we do develop our own machine learning tools. And thank you for the distinction earlier as well, because when we think about generative bots that everybody wants to build, we often think about the hallucinations, and really it's the segmentation of data in the beginning that is so key. I'm not going to go into detail about how transformative the moment we are in is, because we all know it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do. And by doing so, I'm going to start by talking about what we don't do. Because we're an organization that is based on documentation and the sharing of information and the elevation of voices of communities and people who are impacted by human rights violations around the world, our primary purpose is to make sure that those voices are elevated and those voices are heard. That means that we don't automatically fall to use whatever new shiny tool is available, even though it can be a bit hard sometimes, because let's admit there's some really fun new shiny tools out there. But we really look at what's the problem? Like what are our partners around the world? And presently HRDocs works with over 400 NGOs around the world. What is their issue that they're actually facing on documentation, and what's the best solution? If ML is and AI is not that solution, we're not going to do it. But so what do? We, in our Uwazi instances, we look at the ML tools that we could use in each of the various phases of the projects. In collection, we're obviously really looking at crawlers right now. So pulling information off all of those information spaces online. I often talk about access versus accessibility. Just because we have access to information that's locked in PDFs on huge databases all over the world, UN databases included, that doesn't mean the information in it is truly accessible. So we're looking at crawlers to pull that information to databases to make it more accessible. In the organization phase, and I won't go long because I think I already have, we build things like automatic translation. We have a partner in the room who uses a database that will likely come up where we're using automatic translation. So if one participant puts in information about an incident, it will be automatically translated to all of the other languages of the network, which obviously will help with a lot of activism. We also look at metadata extraction, entity extraction, which is a really exciting one for me and particularly preemptive to generative information, and automatic table of contents. Again, so that's where like the nerdy librarian part comes in, because that might not sound exciting, but trust me, it's really helpful. I would also just say then, just to round off, that this is such an exciting moment for us all to talk about not just how we use other people's machine learning and AI, but how we develop it as a community to raise the right voices and to make sure that we're not contributing to the unethical development that is driven by, post-capitalism society, but that we're also contributing and giving options and giving technology as a more of a democratized tool for civil society and human rights activism. And with that, I'll stop.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana, for that. And actually for all the work that you do and also the enabling work that you do for other NGOs, I think it's great also to see your position in that network of civil society actually enabling others then to use those tools. Let us hear from Peggy Hicks now also what the office is doing. As I mentioned, thank you also, and your colleagues will be also animating one of the workshops that just follows. So let's hear from you. What are you doing at the office on AI, but also what are your thoughts and concerns?
Great, thanks, Felix. So glad to be with all of you, and thanks you and Geneva Academy and the Friedrich Naumann for organizing. I actually done, I want to say, if those little tags, if you want a panel that's all women, come into the human rights field, because we have them a lot more than you do in the tech field. So we're going to win some converts today, maybe. No, the idea actually is that we all ought to be mixed, and that's what we're going for, both in terms of tech and human rights, and the gender-based makeup of all of our panels. So just joking there. But let's start off with a couple of general points, Felix, if you'll allow, about the moment that we're in and how we look at it from a human rights perspective. We really focus on the fact that how we answer these questions about how we use AI and digital technology more generally is really the tipping point for human rights. If we can figure out ways to really deploy these tools to help us promote and protect human rights, we will continue to make progress. But if we allow all the risks and problems associated with digital technology to not be addressed, we really see the potential for human rights to move backwards rather than forwards in the way that we'd like. So for us, this is a almost existential question about the future of human rights, answering questions like those posed today. In saying that, I want to emphasize one very important point, which I'm going to make in every single event I'm in on tech from now on, which is that human rights are not the enemy of innovation. Safeguards, security, safety are not the enemy of innovation. In fact, making good tools that work and deploying them correctly is part of what will allow you to be successful and innovate faster and more effectively. So we have to get out of a paradigm where people use phrases like hand-wringing over safety. No, it's not hand-wringing. It's understanding and mitigating risk in a way that will allow you to be successful. So human rights will help us get there and deploy tools that will actually serve people in the way that they're designed to and avoid some of those most severe risks. So when we look at the AI challenge that we face and how we use it as an organization, one of the big questions we have is how can AI be used and deployed and developed in a way that actually serves people, not just profits. So how do we make sure that these important tools, and Dana has already said that there are human rights organizations globally that need tools for their own safety and security in different ways. How do we make sure we're getting the tech to the people who need it is one of the threshold questions that we try to look at. And then I wanted to say that one of the concerns I have is that when we talked about AI risk, we tend to talk about it all in one package, and I think we don't distinguish enough. So I want to think about it in three different areas. Some of it is just the flaws that are kind of built in, and we all know about this in terms of the data sets that are used to build on our world as it is today. You build in discrimination, you get discrimination in your outputs unless you're really working hard to avoid it. So, the stuff that's built in by design or default. The second area, of course, is misuse, But I want to qualify within misuse the fact that some of it is malicious use. There are those that are going to actually use these tools purposely to do bad things. But the more prevalent, and the thing that we worry more about, is really negligence in terms of deploying AI, using it for tasks that go beyond what it's intended for, or with deploying tools before they're ready, where they're not reliable enough, and so they end up having adverse human rights impacts because of that. And then, of course, there's a third category, which is AI doing exactly what it's intended to, but when it does that, it will have some very serious human rights impacts. And you can see that, for example, in the labor force, where we all know that jobs are going to change, and some categories of jobs will be shifted in different ways, and that's something that needs to be addressed. So moving on quickly then to sort of how our office, the UN Human Rights Office, is developing and deploying AI with some of those risks and concerns in mind. There are really sort of 5 different areas that we're engaged in. And one of them I start off with is just how we look at those risks that I talked about, is that we want to use human rights due diligence in terms of the deployment of AI tools. And we want to do it not just for our office, but for the whole UN system. So one of the big projects we've worked on is a UN guidance document on human rights due diligence. And so how the UN uses AI and other digital tech. And that's something that we're working on with our partners within the system. The guidance is there. Now it's just a matter of implementing it. So that's one of the big projects we're engaged in. And we're hoping it also provides a useful template that other organizations and even governments can pick up and use effectively. The second big thing I want to mention is that within the GDC, there is a call for an engagement around a human rights digital advisory service. So this is a service that our office wants to put forward to governments, businesses, civil society about how you traverse some of the human rights challenges in the digital and AI landscape. The good news is we've already started a pilot project to allow us to do some of that work. The bad news is we don't have the funding for the actual project, so we can come back to that later. And then the next big thing that we're doing, and one that we have several of my colleagues in the room engaged in, is that we've set up an innovation and analytics hub. And this was really a way for us to bring digital tech and AI into our own work on an ongoing basis. And I want to say a few specific words about how we're doing that. One of those you're going to have the privilege of seeing directly this afternoon as one of the tools that's rolled out. And this is something that looks at how we use AI-supported tools to look at our national recommendations tracking database, and that can support us in doing human rights follow-up and reporting. So you'll hear a bit more about that later. But in general, the hub is trying to do what we all know needs to be done in terms of developing and using digital technology. That's looking at having a common human rights data set that we can use to engage and look at human rights situations globally. So, for example, there's a tool that we've developed called Civic Space Pulse, which is really trying to give us better real-time information on protests and other things that are indicators of developing human rights situations. And we're also, there's a number of other tools that they're developing. One that's going to be rolled out this week involves the Human Rights Council, which those of you that deal with it know that it does a lot of excellent work. One of the bad things is that excellent work is not particularly easy to understand and access. So the Human Rights Council mapper is actually looking at all the mandates the Human Rights Council has given and what categories they fall into so that you can sort them and look at them in different ways. And that will help us both to make sure that we're building on that work, but also potentially to be a bit more efficient and address some of the duplication or other things that arise. There's a number of other tools, and hopefully my colleagues will get to them because I don't want to go over time, which I already have, looking at my clock. So just 2 quick points on the other ways that we're engaged. One of the things that I think we've found is that you can't address these problems looking only at the government side. You have to look at the company side. And so we have an extensive project called BTech that works with tech companies on how they meet their own responsibilities to respect human rights. And we have conversations with them, and then we develop guidelines and other things that are meant to inform the community and sort of make it be a race to the top in terms of who's doing the best on these issues. So one of the things I talk a lot about it, don't group them all together. Acknowledge those that are doing better practices and call out the ones that aren't when we talk about the business side. And then the final area, which I'll just mention in passing, is that we do a lot of work in technical standard setting, really thinking about how human rights is brought into technical standard setting, including around AI. Sorry for going over, Felix.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peggy. And you went over much less in time than in substance. You brought a lot of it actually in there, because I think speaking both of the 3 levels of the issues in using AI, informing us about the guidance note for the UN, and also your aims of the digital advisory services. And I think here where we talk UN 80, all the financial constraints, maybe that's somewhere a place for impact investment, because it would yield much bigger results actually than the investment needed. So I hope this will come along, and thank you for also sharing all the work that you do with BTEC, with the other projects. So we'll of course discuss those much more in depth. With this, I'd like to turn to our third speaker, Yuping Chan of UNDP, to hear also from UNDP's side, because very often when we talk about sustainable development goals and human rights, we say, well, many people use a high percentage, 90% of SDGs are human rights. So we see really actually that correlation in the SDGs compared to the previous MDGs, which are now grounded in human rights, which are enabling the realization of human rights. So I think we're really in one panel there. So what you do on SDGs very often, as we see also on national level, is work on human rights. So over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Felix. And really, thank you so much for inviting UNDP to be here. We are the development wing of the United Nations. We're present in 170 countries and territories around the world. And precisely as Felix has said, that correlation between development and human rights is particularly important, because the other dichotomy that I sometimes hear about in the United Nations is this weird trade-off between development and human rights, that you can't have one, that the idea is that you are going to trade off development by sort of going backwards in human rights, or you need some kind of stricter types of government controls, or you need to neglect human rights in order to put forward a development paradigm. But I think that sort of thinking has really passed us by. And exactly as you said, if you look at SDGs as really the whole spectrum of a country's development, you have to build human rights in from the very start. And in the same perspective, when we look at using digital as an accelerator for the SDGs, so a report that was produced by UNDP and ITU last year found that 70% of the SDGs can be achieved and accelerated through the use of digital technologies. At that point, where we sort of see this intersection between human rights development and digital, we really need to recognize that at all sectors and all segments of the development perspective, we need to have human rights built in from the start. And so we have this conversation now about generative AIs and the risks and challenges. But for many of the countries that UNDP works with and supports our national governments on, we're not even at the phase of generative AI. We're not at the phase of AI. We're not at the phase of effective and, secure data governance policies. We possibly also in many of our countries do not have connectivity or digital public infrastructure systems, or even electricity and energy. So if you really want to think about human rights and this idea that we need to have this built into how a country approaches the use of digital technologies from the very start, it really has to be an all-process approach that you look at thinking about building the capacity of these countries from the start. And that's really been the focus of the United Nations Development Program, where we look at building the capacity of policymakers all around the world to make these kinds of conscious choices in their use of digital technologies from the very start. We're technology agnostic. So we don't really say, don't choose this particular platform, don't go for the shiny new object. We say, be fully informed in the choices that you make. For many of these developing countries who are at the cusp of this type of digital transition and are making these types of choices right now as to the forms of digital technologies they use, the types of AI they might be deploying, the vendors that they're choosing for their government systems, they do not make a conscious choice to neglect human rights or to choose certain types of systems that we might not think are in the best interest or the most secure or human rights respecting. It's mainly that they're not fully informed of the consequences of these choices, neither do they have full information about what these should be. So for the United Nations Development Program, a lot of what we work with is building the capacity of policymakers, meeting countries where they are in terms of their development trajectories, and really having these choices that are made be made with the long-term interests of citizens in mind, and also, as UNDP has always reflected on, making a rights-based, inclusive choice when it comes to digital transformation. And so when Peggy talks about how the UN system is united around this perspective on human rights, we think about making sure that these same principles apply to the national governments and the program countries that we serve, particularly for the Global South. I'd be very interested, I think, in that perspective from program countries, from developing countries, the global majority, when it comes to these risks and challenges, and how you think the UN system can best support you here. Because this is something that we at the United Nations Development Program have been working very closely on, and really making sure that in the talk of the brighter digital future for all, the risks and challenges of AI, we really are meeting countries where the capacity is needed, where the urgency of addressing these challenges are most necessary to be addressed. We talked about the funding constraints. There's not enough investment in this capacity of developing countries to be able to make these types of informed choices around the use of ethical and responsible technologies. Just recently, for instance, UNDP had announced with the Italian G7 presidency the launch of the AI Hub for Sustainable Development, which is aiming at stimulating local AI innovation startups and ecosystems in Africa, precisely to meet this need around capacity, talent, data, and skills, such that the realization of the AI potential there can be met in an ethical and responsible manner. We've also launched with the German government the Hamburg Declaration on the use of responsible AI for the Sustainable Development Goals, which is again this idea of infusing global AI discussions and use for development outcomes in an ethical and responsible manner. And then we are supporting our national countries around the world, national human rights institutions in over 100 countries, where we are also infusing this rights-based approach. We're actually pioneering with the OHCHR as part of our flagship tripartite partnership, digital readiness assessments for national human rights institutions. All of this is meeting what I had emphasized from the start, the needs of countries at national level and really meeting where they are in terms of the development trajectory, making sure that they have the capacity of policymakers and the capacity within local ecosystems and local circumstances to meet these types of challenges. So I do think that as we reflect on how we as the international community can best support the rest of the world and the rest of the international community, it's important to put that type of emphasis on the global south. And this is where United Nations Development Programme and UNDP has really seen our benefit and our value to the system. And we would welcome working with all of you to continue doing so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've bring really like this practical approach to the discussion, all those examples and the way how UNDP works on the ground. So really great to hear about the possibilities there, and actually also the call for the collaboration that you're giving to everybody. Let us turn to Abeba before we then also, as I said, will open to all of you for your comments and questions. And I think also, and again, I want to congratulate you on your speech this morning. And I think in terms of the limits, in terms of the challenges, maybe if you'd like to share some of your concerns there, but also the potential view of how would you like to see AI to be developed. Maybe it's something like what Dana said. Let's see.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, as you said, my name is Abeba Brohane. I'm assistant professor in the School of Computer Science and Statistics in Dublin, and I lead a research team where we do, my lab is called the AI Accountability Lab. So basically we do exactly what it says on the tin. We do accountability research. So our research ranges from audits and evaluation of training data sets, recommender systems of large social media platforms. For example, we are currently auditing algorithms of recommender systems of TikTok and Instagram, coming from the concern of, young people and teens, and looking at the dissemination of, radicalizing content and mentally harmful content and so on. We also do audits on AI agents and so on. We work on, data curation, data management. How do you do, data curation properly? How do you do it in a way that respects the ownership of data subjects in a way that gives autonomy to the people whose data that we are using to develop AI systems. We also work on capture because currently that's a massive concern. The AI field has been captured both in terms of research. So like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, AI research would have had much more diverse inputs from all kinds of universities, from all kinds of geographies, but over the past 10, 15 years, we do have a paper that came out a few years ago where we look at corporate authorship and funding affiliations of the most influential machine learning papers, and we look at data over 10 years. And we have found over 5-fold increase in the publication of the most influential papers in the top conferences, NeurIPS and ICML, where the AI space is basically research is being dominated and overtaken by corporate interests. We also are examining capture of the regulatory process from Europe to USA to the UK, everywhere. big corporations are really aggressively lobbying and using all kinds of tactics to delay, to deregulate, to water down existing regulations. So these are the kind of wide-ranging research we do. And to come to my concerns, I will only mention two, just to keep the conversation sharp. The first one is hype. As I tried to touch upon it in my keynote this morning, I tried to present empirical evidence as to a lot of AI systems, from state-of-the-art large language models, reasoning models, even, simple regression models. They are sold in a way as if they are magic, as if they can do, magical things. But as auditors, what we do is empirically investigate if these systems do actually do what the vendors claim to do. And almost when you go and audit these systems, almost you find that they don't stand up to scrutiny. So unfortunately, a lot of what we know, which is almost a marketing rhetoric that is sold by big tech corporations. So a lot of the public's perception of AI is unfortunately not founded on rigorous tests or any empirical evidence, but rather based on just trust me, bro, kind of. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I couldn't help. My Gen X is coming out. So, you find that these systems do very little in terms of functionality. I presented a few evidences looking at text summarization, medical diagnosis, and algorithms that are used in the Dutch, algorithms that are used in welfare assessment and allocation. And actually, I found, so everywhere you look, these kind of algorithms always end up, disproportionately negatively impacting some people, whether it is marginalized communities or immigrant communities or people from other nationalities or racial minorities and so on. And in the Netherlands, over the past few years, they tried to develop this algorithm called Smart Check, where they tried to do everything right. They avoided all the proxies and all the demographic factors that contribute to bias. They opened the conversation. They invited active external scrutiny. They sought active feedback on the design and function of the algorithm. And they were extremely transparent, as fair and responsible as possible. But in the end, the algorithm has to be stopped, has to be paused, because it was still unfair. So for me, this is a really good example of how inherently social, inherently historical issues cannot really be tackled with AI. You can fix the system all you want at the model level, but you can't, you will still have impacts on the ground, on the societal level, that cannot be fixed by algorithms without confronting societal issues, without confronting historical issues.
Thank you. We'll have to come to a close.
Okay. Yeah, so the first one is my worry is hype, and the second one is basically around, again, massive power, concentration of power with big tech corporations, and there is conflicts of interest everywhere, even in this summit. I mean, if human rights and AI for good type of events were sponsored by corporations that are actively exacerbating and contributing towards the worsening of SDGs. Again, I mentioned earlier today, corporations like Microsoft, for example, talk about tackling fundamental rights under the ban of AI for social good. But on the other hand, they are the very company that are contracting with Israel military defense, that are providing cloud infrastructure, that are providing the technology that is making the world a worse place. So this is the kind of things we have to, we can't. we can't shy away from. So yeah, these are the concentration of power and AI hype are my
Thank you very much.
two concerns.
Thank you very much, Aviva. And indeed, I mean, those two sides are exactly what I wanted to get at. And sorry, I'm standing a little bit behind you in the moderation. This is just due to our room setup. And again, apologies to all those who are standing there. I would like to give us just 10 minutes for very quick reactions to the presentations. A quick question, no long speeches, please. We'll just have a quick reaction here, quick reaction from the panel, and then we'll move into our next segment. Because as I promised, there are workshops, and for that we'll also then ask the people who are standing in the back to rather stand around each of the tables, because then we'll be really working on the table. So again, apologies for the setting, but I think we're the only event that had human rights in the title, and I'm really excited to see that so many people wanted to join us. So thank you. With this, opening the floor, my colleague Domenico has the microphone. Those who are closest to him are the most lucky to be speaking first. Please raise your hand just like this if you want to speak. And Domenico, you hand the mic to people, and just please keep it short.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Hi, my name is Ash. I'm from the Pacific community. It's a question for Peggy and Yupin Chan, I think, mostly. I wish I shared your positivity and optimism around the links between development, human rights and AI. I think there are some synergies, but as we've heard from Abiba, when it comes to corporations, they don't share that goal. When your aim is human rights, I think that there can be, but when your aim is profit, human rights are always going to come second.
Okay, thank you. Just raise your hand, everybody who wants to speak, so we know for the next ones. Otherwise, I won't cut anyone short anymore if nobody else is speaking. Yes, please.
Hi, yeah, this is kind of combining a point that Dana made and Biba's kind of general speech. I think what you said about Shiny and that kind of attraction with Shiny, I think the size of this conference is in some ways a consequence of the Shiny. But as Abiba kind of pointed out, there's a lot of issues with that. How do we kind of ensure that we don't keep obsessing over the Shiny? I think kind of the UN system and a lot of the people around here, there's kind of some levers we could use, but I also often see them not being used. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that before.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There were more requests also, some more comments, questions also. Yes, please. And you see we're making up on the gender balance here.
Hi everyone, I'm Flavio from a non-for-profit. Just quick one on talent. So a lot of good talent in AI goes to big tech. Are you finding young talent interested in joining kind of the human rights AI space, since it's a fairly new space? Just interested to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing there.
Great, thank you very much. And I think we have young talent then as table moderators, so we'll introduce them just in a little.
Thank you. Sana Shtati. Thank you for the whole panel. It was so interesting to listen to you all. I have a question for Mrs. Peggy Hicks about the processes of human rights due diligence and how you make the coordination with the standardization that is put into effort by the ITU. How do you coordinate with them? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we have one more person here in the front, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Trust and safety has made some ground with big tech in their efforts for harm minimization, but it's very much largely retrospective. They still rely on blacklists, and this is extended to a certain degree to AI. And I was wondering whether you're aware of any research that goes into more proactive embedding care into big tech, social media, or LLMs. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and sorry for those who cannot get a question now, but I promise we'll be interactive also in the further running of this event. So if I go by reverse order, maybe if that's okay for you, and I'd start with sorry?
Don't make me go last.
Oh, no. Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, you have another speaking engagement.
Yeah,
I know.
sorry.
Apologies for that. I forgot about the timing.
And the questions are so big that there's no way I can do them justice, to be frank. I mean, what I can say is that we are continually asking ourselves those questions and focusing on them. In terms of the corporate side, the points on corporate capture and where we stand on it are very well taken. Part of the work that we do is trying to do a couple of things to change that balance in different ways. obviously there are other tools that are there as well, like antitrust and other things that, could have an impact. But part of what we do is that we are trying to reach out to and engage not just with the big tech companies here, but we have a BTech Africa project that's working with startups and other things there. But we're also looking at the investor side. So who's investing money in tech companies, venture startups and other things, and trying to get them to think about the risks. Human rights risk is something they should care about when they're investing, because we think they have more leverage over the companies than we do. So it's thinking through some of those things, but it's also about developing ways in which we can actually invest in AI outside of that corporate profit sphere. And that, I think, is ultimately one of the key things, is that if this is going to be a critical tool for the future of humankind, we need to make sure that we're investing in a way that doesn't just leave it in those hands and for those purposes. So we are looking at it. On the technical standard setting side and the human rights due diligence, two different projects, but actually with ITU, we have a joint effort really to work with them in terms of opening up standard setting organizations to human rights expertise. And so we've been looking with them at what are the barriers to that? Sometimes it's institutional, it's a pay to play to be in the room. But sometimes it's simply that there isn't much space for NGOs and it's a very costly thing to do. So trying to break down the barriers so that human rights expertise can be in standard setting rooms more. And so, for example, ITU has had our High Commissioner come to the World Standard Development Conference that's held. So to really just integrate the thinking of human rights into some of the standard setting work.
Thank you so much. Yes, if we talk about human rights by design, it's very difficult sometimes because, again, we also heard from ITU that human rights as such is still really absent in those standards. So it's great to see that work going along. Please.
I think on this point of the shiny, I totally hear you, right? As Peggy says, it's something that we at the UN have to grapple with. But especially as Felix had mentioned, we are at this moment of a crisis for the international system. And so unless national governments are willing to step up, I'm not really sure civil society or human rights advocates have the money to pump into the UN system to support our countries and our developing countries make the right kinds of choices in terms of the use of digital technology. So I think it's good that there is a platform such as, AI for Good, where we can hear criticisms of, what companies are doing, and hopefully if there's a company in the room perhaps that can actually respond to exactly these criticisms that are being made, at least there is a chance to hear these types of voices and have that kind of dialogue. At least my hope is that allowing for these spaces to have these conversations will allow us to make this type of collective progress. And you are right, these are questions that Peggy said we grapple with every day, but we're not sure that there are viable alternatives to having to work with companies so that we can in some way bring some benefits to developing countries, while, as I said, making sure that they have the right type of capacity and information to make these types of choices in meaningful ways. Look, we're the ones grappling with these problems now, but how many of us actually sit in developing countries and are advising policymakers on the consequences of these choices? We sit in some ways in a position of privilege that we can have these conversations and have choices to be made. But in a lot of developing countries, right, they're going with the cheapest option. They're thinking about what can derive the most immediate benefits for the citizens in terms of just providing connectivity or information online or basic types of digital services. So they don't have the luxury of these types of choices. So what are we as an international community prepared to commit so that they have that kind of choices that Peggy was talking about? We at the United Nations Development Program have put a lot of work behind digital public infrastructure, open source tools, open source AI, digital public goods. Well, hopefully that's not about this type of big tech companies forcing certain types of products that developing countries only have the choice between. But these are institutions that have a lot of money behind them, and what we as an international community need to do is exactly as Peggy said, create the impetus investments in these alternatives that developing countries then can be presented with and then offered the opportunity to choose between. Because again, I think it is a luxury of choice that we have, but is that kind of luxury also afforded to others around the world?
Thank you, and also short reactions by the two of you, and I know you need to go to another event. Thank you very much, Peggy. Please.
Yeah, can I quickly clarify that people who work in big companies are not necessarily representative of big companies? I myself used to be on the other side. I was in Google DeepMind for a short bit. And some of my colleagues that have the highest integrity actually work in these companies. However, at the end of the day, no matter how amazing you are, no matter how high your integrity, it's the business model of the company that always wins. So I want to clarify, even if there are people who work here in OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, whatever, it's not, you can't, I'm not asking you to defend, and I'm not equating you to a company. I am asking you to actively and directly criticize and make accountable these large corporations. At the end of the day, I think the speaker over there said it's their profit maximization, revenue generation that wins. And this is why I think the other question, this is why I'm going to make maybe a bold statement, maybe a controversial statement here. And this is why AI technologies are inherently anti-human rights. No matter what aspect you look at it, think of the massive amounts of data that has been gathered from your digital traces, from your everyday interactions. That data makes its way into some kind of database that is then used to develop AI systems that then comes back to make assessment on all kinds of your daily lives, whether you are applying for a visa, whether you are trying to travel to the US. And the US new authoritarian administration has actually explicitly stated that anything you say, you post on social media, and now you are required to have a social media platform, a social media account, if you want to travel to the US, and you have to make it open. That data is then used to make judgments, all kinds of spaces, whether you are applying for a loan, whether you are applying for insurance. So all this aggressive data that seems benign inherently comes back to prevent us from having freedom of speech, freedom of movement, all kinds of fundamental rights.
Thank you. We'll have to move.
Can I quickly add also, in terms of talent, there are plenty of people that are willing to do the right work. So one of the people in my lab is, for example, she worked as an engineer in one of the big companies for 9 years. She was willing to leave massive wage, massive salary, and come work in our lab for a fraction. So there is enthusiasm, there is talent, there is people. But we have to really, name names, and we have to challenge structures from the roots that are censoring us, that are criticizing them literally impossible.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And actually, let's hear from Dana to conclude that panel, because I think it's great to have different voices on the podium. And that question is AI detrimental to human rights? Maybe we'll have another view there. Let's hear you, Dana.
Well, I can say I'm very excited to have a lot more conversations with you about a lot of these matters. I mean, I think from our perspective, it is really also about like alternatives to the big tech, as I've mentioned, and as an organization that builds databases that are secure and private and building ML tools that work within that data. I think it goes to the question of like, how do we deal with not just the big shiny things, or how do we not get drawn into the big shiny things? And I know we're really short on time, so I guess I would summarize it by saying, like, make human rights shiny again. And that, like, human rights is being so deeply and fundamentally challenged right now. And we don't really know what working on human rights in the future looks like. We talk about we don't know what the future of work looks like, but what's the future of human rights work? And I think highlighting that technologies, if they're developed in contexts that are ethical and raise the right voices, can actually help bridge the digital divide and bring civil society along for this crazy ride in impactful ways. And on just very lastly and very quickly on your question of sort of the workforce, I agree. There are people willing to sort of make that jump. I have to say, as a executive director of an NGO who's trying to build technology outside of the big system, it's hard to find particularly coders. We are lucky. We have quite a large coding team of almost 10 people, including 2 ML specialists. But a challenge every day is finding the wages to have them stay, to have them compete with big tech. And so that's actually one that I think is something we all need to really focus on, is the distribution of funds to make sure that human rights is centralized in any kind of frontier technologies, AI or other.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. I'll invite you to join us actually now on each of the tables. Thank you again very much for starting us into that. And I'll invite all of you actually to get out your phones to actually move into our first our first interactive exercise. So we have a Slido here, we have QR codes, I hope you can scan that. And we'll just go through that, and I invite you also to then start chatting at your tables among yourselves on those questions. So we have actually the first thing, which is an expansion of the two stickers you got in the beginning, and we'd like to see who is in academia, who is in private sector, international organization, CSOs, NGOs, or government. So please just like enter this so we see what the... So anyone still? So I see we're a largely academic crowd over here. Let's see if human rights are really that academic only. And private sector is growing, international organizations as well. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. I think the next question will be quicker because you'll all have scanned already that thing. And yes, feel free to chat at your tables already about that. And the people in the back, really, if you would like to come in and just gather around the tables, because as of now, we'll be really working in this setting. So I invite you really to come over. Sorry, we don't have more chairs. Okay, yes, so the percentage fell down a little bit, but I see that we're still, academia is still leading. And with this, we're moving to the next one, actually. So we want to know, actually, your knowledge in AI. None, basic, intermediate, advanced, expert. Let's see where we are there. A little bit feeling the temperature again of the room. It's our way of speed dating, so you don't have to each ask each other, but it's really like quickly getting a look right on the screen. Okay, basic knowledge. Yes, I've heard of AI. That's very good that you have. Intermediate is now leading. Okay, yes. Okay, I mean, experts, we have experts here, yes. I'm definitely not one of those. Okay, so intermediate. So, well, actually, yes, yes, we're quite Swiss. We're meeting there in the middle of our extremes. So please, the next one. And now, of course, we want to know the experience, expertise, knowledge on human rights and development. Again, you see it here from none to expert. Let's see if that gives a different picture than the AI one before. Yeah, I see. Many still go for the middle option, huh? Yes. Well, I don't have it completely in mind, but I think the room leans to human rights and development expertise a little bit more than AI expertise. But so it's great that we have our colleagues from ETH Zurich at the tables also to help us later on with the technical side of things. Thank you already now to all those table facilitators. Yes, advanced. Here we are more advanced. Okay, if we have the next slide, please. In what ways, if any, is AI being used or explored in your organization's work on human rights and SDG monitoring and reporting? So here you can actually type responses. Please only type a word. Don't send us a full article. Just type a word because, again, here with our limited AI skills, we'll just do a word cloud. Actually, we will not synthesize long speeches, articles, and contributions. All right. And for those who don't know all the abbreviations, NMIRFs are national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. So those are kind of the interministerial groupings that really work with the UN human rights system. I don't know if we have more. Oh, whoa, wow. There we go. We have some, yes. Now you might be actually tempted to type in the word that's already bigger to make it get even bigger. Well, it's a little bit comforting, of course, that if we said the room has a lot of academics, that research is still a big topic for you. Thank you for that. And the databases. Yes, impact. Okay, but I see actually that it gets a huge cloud, so you have a lot of things to discuss on later on the tables, and we'll move to the next, please. Here again, it's just to self-identify the main concerns that you want to have with using AI in human rights work. Sorry, we already give you a number of replies, but let's see there which one you see as most problematic, if it's privacy, as I see is skyrocketing here, or if it's also the practical technical capacity actually seems not to be such a... okay, good. Sorry, I'm not saying anything. Don't want to actually influence you on your choices. Okay, risk of bias and discrimination. Yes, I mean, very much what we heard also on the panel before. And followed by privacy and data protection issues. Okay, so quite clear concerns. And next one, please. Here, what kind of support would most increase the impact of AI tools in your work? Because again, of course, we want to see practically later on how do you want to use AI. It's not just to judge AI, but to see how to use AI. What would it be? And yes, that's very coherent that if before your concerns were about privacy and ethical standards, that the ethical and legal guidance makes it to the top. The data, we see that when discussing also biases before. Okay, you're kind of okay with the user friendliness of that stuff. I guess that's what also corporations work most on. So you feel like your agent, as we heard this morning, is really helping you, booking the table for you, sending messages to your friends so you don't have to deal with this bunch. All right, and we have one more?
I think we have 2 more.
We have 2 more. Well, then let's go. What AI applications are most promising for human rights and SDGs monitoring? So that now we'll have to see, of course, whether we have, that's maybe the tech experts here. So again, yes, please the functions, please just small words so we see the word cloud over here. No idea, thank you for that. That was my first one.
Oh, wow.
Okay, yes, Claude, hello, there we have one specific one also. Machine learning and localization, yes. Yeah. Plus there is a no IFIA also, I guess that's what I put in the same basket. And machine learning. Thank you. And again, huge collection. So we'll be looking at those also afterwards in, I think, the continuation of our own work. And time is tight, so we move to the last one. To what extent do current AI tools meet ethical and transparency standards for high-risk fields like human rights? I think there also in the morning we heard that example of where actually algorithm-based decisions might go wrong, whether it's on livestock or actually, in that our case, really on people in the delivery of social services or others. A hallucination is quite an impactful thing there. Okay. Very limited compliance we see so far. So Dana, there is a lot of work for you to deliver better products actually than what we have right now. Thank you all very much for that. This was just to get a little bit an overview of what we have in the room, because now we'll have 2 exercises where you'll actually discuss at your tables with your table facilitator really the possibilities of using AI. And I think this is the moment, Domenico, I'm handing over to you if you want to come over here for the moderation and to introduce also the next group. We're not opening to a panel now because we really want to have the time for the practical exercises. If we have the time in the very end of the session, we'll come back to a panel to also for all of you to share a little bit your thoughts on this workshop and the topics. Domenico, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Felix. And before I do that, thank you so much for moderating this initial segment of the workshop, and to you, thank you to you. The vibe in this room is pretty lively, I must admit. I haven't attended that many AI for Good events this year, but indeed, congratulations for that as well. So before, inviting both Arthur and Anselma, HCHR colleagues, to the podium, I just wanted to briefly introduce to you what we're up to in the next hour. We'll move to 2 complementary segments that aim to showcase how artificial intelligence is already being harnessed to support human rights monitoring, both as a standalone innovation, as well as, and this is what we're going to see in a second, an enhancement within existing digital human rights tracking tools and databases. And these segments, we hope, will offer a practical glimpse to you all into how AI is helping to plan, to analyze, and communicate human rights information more efficiently and effectively. So, our first stop is what we have called segment 3. A hands-on simulation designed to let you engage, yes please, directly with an AI-enhanced digital human rights tool. And this session is led by Artur Jacewicz and Anselm Troku from the treaty body capacity building team of the UN Human Rights Office, the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. And the objective of this segment is to explore the practical use of OHCHR's National Recommendations Tracking Database, as Peggy mentioned, NRTD, a digital tool that integrates AI features to support planning, implementation, and, as you will see in groups in a second, summarizing follow-up actions on human rights recommendations. So we'll begin with a live demonstration now of AI-assisted planning and progress tracking. And this will then be followed by group work. We'll test and reflect on AI-generated summaries and the role of human oversight. Let's not forget that as well in ensuring quality and context. And with that, Artur,
yes,
take it away.
Thank you, Dominica. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I heard the panelists, I thought it would be much easier, but after all these heated debates, I think it would be a little bit challenging to promote some tools with AI components, especially developed by UN. And yes, indeed, as Dominica mentioned, both of us, Anselm and myself, were representing a small treaty bodies capacity building program, which was actually established back in 2012, in particular to help states with their struggles in meeting their responsibilities, their obligation with human rights machinery. And we saw that 40% of our participants are academia, but around 40%. But I just want quickly to ask you, how many of you are aware of human rights machinery? Somehow we're engaged in human rights reporting or implementation? If you can just raise your hands. Okay, plenty of you. So for those of you who are unaware of this, I would say, painful process, just imagine that we have at least 70 human rights mechanisms within UN system, which actually monitor and assess human rights situation in different countries, in different parts of the world, and they specifically provide the analysis and recommendations to different countries. Roughly, we have around 1,200 human rights recommendations for each country. So meaning on daily basis, state officials, they're struggling with finding the way how to report, how to implement human rights recommendations, and how to meet their obligations. So that's how we actually come up, like, again, capacity building team, with this database or national recommendations tracking application. Because now it's more than just a database, it's a tool which helps state officials and other stakeholders, we have some pilot versions for NHRIs, to meet their obligations, to follow up on human rights recommendations, and to report to human rights mechanisms. So the system itself is based on recommendations delivered by human rights mechanism, and we have around, sorry, why it doesn't work? Okay. Oh. Why it doesn't work? Sorry.
Yeah, there's an issue with the mouse.
Okay, so at least, no, we need to use this one. Excuse me, can you help us with the laptop? Because it just stopped working.
Yes, and whilst we do that, maybe just as an introduction to NRTD as an element, one of the many tools that we, as Felix was mentioning earlier on, are analyzing as part of this growing ecology of digital human rights tracking tools and databases. When we talk about tracking tools, the NRTD, indeed, as the name suggests, it basically and essentially follows the life cycle of recommendations, be they issued by UN human rights mechanisms, as is the case for NRTD, but they could also indeed also track the implementation of any other human rights mechanism that issues recommendations. It's basically the digital interface of what are now called national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, coordinating bodies that include the different ministries that are supposed to monitor and implement human rights. So NRTD is the tool that is developed by the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights. We have another great example of such tools in the Americas, Paraguay, thanks also to the support of UNDP, introduced Simore Plus, I think more than 10 years ago now. Simore stands for Sistema de Monitoreo de Recomendaciones. Plus stands for an additional element, which means that since, I believe, 5-6 years, civil society organizations can include information into the tracking of recommendations. And last but not least, Impact OSS, and we also have a representative of one of the organizations that is using Impact OSS, the Pacific Community. And Impact OSS is an open source software that also allows to track such information. Today we have a chance to look at the national recommendations tracking databases from within. This is basically what members of the different ministries would be able to see once an RTD is implemented within each member state. I don't know if we're back on track.
Yes, we're ready to
Very
go,
good.
and I think it's still about challenging our approach to AI. But at least in our defense, we can say that everything you see here, I mean, like related to AI component, was done without any funding, because we're actually facing this UN-wide financial crisis. So at least no influence from any side. So again, as you can see, this is our testing lab, and that's why you see just 400 recommendations, but it's like active recommendations for a particular state. And as I mentioned, all these like features are based around recommendations. And just imagine that whenever you need to implement your recommendation, you actually have to develop some follow-up activities. And as a state official, you might not have real and like full understanding what was suggested by human rights mechanism. You need to come up with some basic ideas so that you can polish them with your network of focal points, that you can discuss them with different line ministries, and finally come up with really good follow-up activities that can help you to implement your recommendation. And again, recommendations, they can focus on completely different areas of human rights situation on the ground. Plus, in some cases, again, imagine we're talking about more than 1,000 recommendations for one state. These recommendations, in some cases, they can be really similar to each other. They can be interlinked. Sometimes they can actually contradict to each other, and still you need to find the way how to implement it. So what we did, we decided that with AI, with a proper methodology, again, we fully agree with all concerns that were raised by previous panelists, but we believe also that with proper expertise, with proper knowledge, skills, and experience, state officials can use AI in order to simplify their work and in order to speed up their work. So whenever you press to apply methodology developed by OHCHR, you can receive recommendations for follow-up activities or suggestions from AI. Again, it's all based on our methodology. It's not just you asking ChatGPT or any other model for any recommendations, because again, as you might know, or most of you already heard, that hallucination, some weird suggestions, some bias and discrimination, yes, it can be the case, but at least we're trying to mitigate this risk with a proper prompt, with a proper methodology applying to these suggestions. So I will be cheating a little bit, and by the way, just to give you an understanding, so indeed, we have some backup for this methodology. We have some ideas behind this prompt. But now, like, you can also imagine that for all these follow-up activities, you need to receive some inputs, some update reports, some progress reports from different focal points. And again, when we're talking about state officials, like NMRFs, a wonderful acronym that we already used, like this coordinating mechanism, we're talking about like 20, 60, 100 people, depending on your country. And all these people, they, to a certain extent, engage in implementing recommendations. It means that for one activity, you can receive inputs from, let's say, dozens of persons. And you can imagine different formats, different styles, different understanding what kind of information you're expecting to get from them. So in order to simplify the work of coordinating body, whenever you get activities, and I forgot to mention that whenever we promote AI, we always highlight that AI cannot be a magic tool and cannot replace human being. Anyway, you need to go back and check whatever was suggested by AI. So these inputs can vary from like 100 words to like 10-page document. So ideally for the database, you should have all these follow-up activities fully completed by different stakeholders, by different focal points. And then you need to summarize this information in order to get some progress report and to find the way how to monitor and track your progress. So in order to help coordinating body, again, we come up with a prompt which can analyze information from the database, checking the recommendation itself, checking the follow-up activities, and all inputs received from focal points. And then the AI assistant will come back to you with this summary, but also divided into several sections, highlighting what you managed to achieve, but also underlying your gaps and what is actually required in order to achieve real progress under a particular recommendation. So just to not to waste too much time, just to show the final AI assistant component, whenever you progressed with your implementation, you still have to report to different human rights mechanisms. As I mentioned, we're talking about 70 as of today, human rights mechanisms for the UN system, but also you have regional, you have national, and you might have some other mechanism. In order to get your report, you still need to summarize information now in completely different format. And from our side, again, the system can help you. It can go and check whatever you put there and return you another text in another format. Okay, sorry. Yes. So again, relying on information you provided to the system, but now checking it through another prompt and returning not the same information, but more or less similar to what we had previously for the implementation report, for the progress report, but now in a completely different format in order to stick to human rights mechanism requirements for state reporting. And again, you can imagine that these reports are quite formal, they're again resource intensive, and they should go through national endorsement first and then just go to international human rights mechanisms. And yeah, I will stop here.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I will be very quick. I just want to address a few words on the disclaimer on the data protection we have been going for developing these features at OHCHRs. We were talking this morning about automation and keeping human in the loop. And I think this is really one important point that we have always tried to assess and mitigate. So the information the AI is using for summary is anyway at the end entered by human. As Arthur mentioned, in order for this component to work, you still need to have some implementation status written by the AI. And our goal was, and we will never automatize that because at the end, you still need a real input on the implementation status of the recommendation. So we are using AI more as an automation process for complex and lengthy processes, but we are keeping human in the loop. On the technical side of things, also, we have always tried to be as flexible as possible. So this tool is for member states. We are offering, when member states are interested, to host the tool ourselves, and we are using isolated models behind in order not to share the data. So the data stay in an isolated environment. Also, the tool itself can be directly hosted by the member state when they make the request. It's made with open source technologies, and the member state can decide to use any type of model they want. They can use any open source model they want, and nowadays we are seeing more and more relatively better in terms of accuracy open source model. And we just a final word, we are keeping always this. We will always avoid that AI is doing the whole work. we are always trying to keep this as automation and keep the human in the loop. Thank you very much. And now we are going to, I guess, go on a table exercise. Dominique will explain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both. Now, you might have seen that there were seats reserved for table facilitators. Now, as Felix was mentioning earlier on, we have a very dear network of colleagues from different organizations, including ETH Zurich. We've been partnering with them. We're very proud of this collaboration that has been going on for over a year now. And it is really this, also symbolically, that we want to showcase in this room, this collaboration between engineers and human rights experts. We will look at summarization exercises within NRTD. We are the only ones that are not part of a ministry that is able to see this tool today. So thanks a lot to HCHR for the trust. We will not share username and passwords. We will not dare, but perhaps maybe for students, who knows? Now they can't say no. Anyway, so I will leave the table facilitators to enter into the NRTD tool and to basically showcase what we've gone through on the screen. And you'll basically be able to see how AI is simplifying the work of different ministerial representatives that would be logging into this tool in order to track the implementation progress and the summarization of all the activities that they've put into. So I'll let you divide into groups. We're a little bit running short of time, but I think 10 minutes would be worth spending on this. So I'll take the floor in 10 minutes' time. We would like now to pass on to segment 4, which is a live demonstration, again, of how generative AI can be used to rapidly prototype tools for human rights monitoring. Our presenter is Dr. Lukasz Sosiewicz. Was that right?
Very good.
Was that a good pronunciation? Yes. Assistant professor at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan, where he focuses on the intersection of AI and human rights. And this specific segment's goal has a different aim, and that is to showcase a low-cost, human-in-the-loop workflow. Using real data from the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression that we had hoped that would have been in the room, but regardless of that, you have made this in a matter of hours, if not less, towards this workshop, and a generative AI assistant. And this is to generate a code, apply thematic tagging, and build a functional digital database in real time. So this is basically how to access human rights data in a very short time. And this won't be a coding class. It's a case study which I reckon to be in creativity, transparency, and how AI can empower rights work even without deep technical expertise. And yes, I'll leave it to you, Lukasz.
Thank you. So I will start with an exciting study that has been recently published by a group of researchers from Harvard. One of the core questions they asked was the following: does AI enable participants to bridge typical functional boundaries, for instance, allowing R&D professionals to produce commercially viable ideas, or commercial professionals to propose technically sound solutions? And before we answer, I would like to just stress, be careful with generalization. This study focused just on 2 specific sectors, and only one of them, R&D, is really relevant when it comes to building digital solutions for human rights. But that doesn't mean that patterns they found couldn't appear in other configurations too. So how did they explore this question? They conducted a large-scale field experiment involving 776 professionals from Procter & Gamble company. You might recognize some of the products that they make. And what did they find out? First, that a single person with AI matched 2-person teams, interdisciplinary teams, so R&D plus commercial professionals, in overall quality of solutions. And second, and most importantly, individual working with AI delivered cross-domain solutions, just like a full R&D plus commercial team. These charts that you can see show how ideas differed between commercial and technical participants, both with and without AI. In both graphs, the green line represents commercial professionals and the orange line is for R&D professionals. And the x-axis shows how commercial or technical the ideas were. The higher values, so more to the right, mean more technically oriented solutions. For instance, developing new materials and using them in one of the products that you saw on previous slide. And as you can see, when individuals work together with AI, the distinction between commercial and technical participants disappears. So basically, the solutions are much better balanced. And that's what makes AI a true cybernetic teammate. It has a potential to reduce functional boundaries, at least in some contexts. And when I read that paper, I immediately thought back to late 2023, when I, without any programming background, built a database of UN general comments using ChatGPT-4. And that experience proved to me firsthand that one person without coding skills plus AI assistant can build technically viable solutions for human rights. And now let me show how you can do it. So as human rights experts, we often need to navigate large numbers of documents, very frequently in PDF format, that are not very machine friendly. And with generative AI, we can prototype simple databases or dashboards that can significantly improve some aspects of our work, like research and analysis. And we can go from PDFs to dashboard in less than 120 seconds. And now we can see how we can do it. I prepared a prompt that I will use in one of AI assistants. Actually, the prompt is already here. And I included a sample of PDF. It's 3 pages excerpt from the recent report of UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression. And we are asking AI to develop a user-friendly database that will facilitate its search and information extraction. And we would like that our application to have the following features. So first of all, paragraph level extraction, which is very useful when you would like to really quote the specific paragraph of a document, like general comment or report from Special Rapporteur. We would like to preserve the whole formatting and numbering. We would like also to come up with some labeling system that will allow us to filter out some significant paragraphs relevant to specific themes. And regarding search functionality, we would like to have keyword search, thematic filtering, and also real-time search and highlight of our results. And regarding user interface, you would like to have modern responsive design, which is mobile friendly. Please use some color coding, theme tags for easy identification, and also ensure that paragraph numbering system is kept for reference and also for double manual check if we would like to really use the results. And on the right side, you can see that the code is being generated. It takes between 2 to 3 minutes usually. And basically, you can use this kind of generative AI assistants currently, like Google Translate, between natural language. So we are communicating in natural language what you need, and you receive programming language, Python, HTML, JavaScript. If you would like to have more control over the result, you should provide much more detail, like for instance, which language to use or which packages to use, because there are different packages that are handling, for instance, with PDFs or with Excel files or with Word documents, etc., etc. And the more detail you provide in the prompt, the better results typically are. Here the prompt is relatively short, so let's see how it will work out. It's still, I can see, generating, so maybe in order to save time, let's just check what it has generated in the morning. It was exactly the same prompt, as you can see, so no cheating. And what you get is that. And as you can see, we have paragraph level extraction from 1 to 15. We have some thematic labels. We can select specific labels. We can see that there are 7 out of 15 paragraphs that match that label. We can see what the labels mean, because that's actually how I instructed our assistant. We can also see whether the search functionality works. So you can see media, 3 out of 15 paragraphs, everything is highlighted. You can see only 3 of them. Then let's say journalist. Again, you can see that it works. There is export function that I actually added. You can, whenever you wish to change anything in your application, you can ask it, please add dark mode to increase accessibility. And what you will see is that now the AI assistant is rewriting the code. I mean, firstly, it's thinking how to do it, and then it starts to rewrite the code. And you can work like this with the assistant to deliver a prototype of application, basically using natural language. So you don't need to know programming language. Actually, the more you know, the better result you can deliver, but still it can fill out the gaps that you don't have. And in that way, you also gain knowledge on how to do it better next time. So the first application that I developed, the database of UN general comments, it took me a week. And the application that I will show you in the next slide that includes comments, reports from the special rapporteur, it took me 1 afternoon. So that's also due to increasing capabilities of AI. So every next model is basically doing that better and better. So you can commission much more to AI. And unfortunately, it takes a long time this time. So you never know actually how much time it takes. And also the more sophisticated models you will use, the more time it will take. And that's something that you can expect. So, okay, let's maybe move back to the presentation because we are slightly behind the schedule. So what are the benefits and what are the limitations? On the benefit side, generative AI can deliver tailor-made apps using plain English, not code. That means that human rights experts can lead design from the start, embedding also human rights by design approach directly into tools, because we as human rights experts can be really present from the very beginning and evaluate the output that we get at every stage, actually, of the whole process. The drop in development costs also opens up these capabilities to smaller actors, individual researchers like me, for instance. I did it without any financial support. The General Commons database or the Special Rapporteurs database, also NGOs, citizens who could not afford proprietary software before. But there are also some limitations and risks to keep front of mind. Exposing data and code online can raise security and privacy concerns, and especially with sensitive human rights data. There are hallucinations, so you must keep humans in the loop to verify the output at every stage. And finally, deployment online, it's always requires some additional efforts and maintenance, so it's not that easy, but it's also becoming easier and easier with every month. And how to maximize benefits and reduce risks by building AI literacy. So to that, human expertise and machine capabilities can complement each other in powerful, responsible ways. And if you have more than 2 minutes, more than 120 seconds, you can build, for instance, the application that allows you to browse through and search through the reports of UN Special Rapporteurs. That's the example that I built last week before preparing for this workshop, and something that I'm also going to develop further with my colleague Zuzanna Kowalska, and would like to include all UN special procedures. That's everything from me. I'd like to encourage you to experiment with AI and to discover potential use cases.